Hey there folks, Rel here. Today I wanted to give some feedback on the new changes to the Drifter jump jets currently live on the test server. This episode is geared mostly toward the developers, but I'd like everyone in the comments below to kind of build upon this video by sharing their own feedback. As a lot of the channel is already aware, I am a hardcore advocate of Drifter jump jets. I think they provide a lot of depth to the light assault class, and they have a high skill ceiling that takes a lot of finesse to use well. I've made multiple guides on the Drifter jump jets, which are linked in the description below, and if I'm well versed in anything having to do with PlanetSide 2, it'd probably be Drifter jump jets. That said, let's talk about the changes. So on the test server, instead of the flat drifting that you do horizontally when drifters are activated, you're actually also going to receive some vertical motion. The downside is that you drain more jump jet bar than normal upon activation. If you're jumping and activating these from the ground, it's probably about a jump and a half's worth of vertical height. So if you were just standing and you jumped and then you added 50% on top of that, that's about what it is, right? So in addition to the vertical height, you're also getting a slight bit of forward thrust as well, as long as you're running when you activate them. And I thought this was kind of interesting. So this is good. As you can see in the footage, I'm able to just kind of cruise around and jump over low walls and whatever else pretty easily. And it has a really good feel to it. It honestly reminds me, I never played back in beta, but it honestly reminds me of the Icarus jump jets from the alpha trailer, but without all the vertical motion. And I know that sounds strange, but the new drifters feel like they have a bit more punch to them, which is why I say it. So there are, however, some slight disadvantages to that vertical motion, and we'll go over that in a bit. In addition to that initial burst with some vertical height, if you spam jump jets, so spam the spacebar, you're actually going to ascend walls and jump over small barricades that otherwise would stop a drifter dead in their tracks. The catch, however, is that it uses up a lot of thrust in order to gain that height, and you literally have to spam the spacebar in order for it to work. If you don't do it quickly enough, the additional height you would have gotten just it's canceled out because you start to fall. And the concerns being addressed, from what I can tell, are that the Drifter jump jets basically require you on the live server, they require you to either exploit wall climbing mechanics, use vehicles, like ESF, and then jump out of those, use the environment or jump pads, elevators, that sort of thing. You have to use that in order to fill the same role that standard jump jets do. And that role, of course, being to circumvent enemy defenses. So with standard jump jets, you can just jump over a wall, you can jump into a tower, you can jump on a roof, and that's that. But with drifters, you're giving up that ability in exchange for a whole lot of horizontal motion. So newer players, and even experienced ones, are shying away from the drifters due to that loss of overall versatility. That's something that I completely understand, and I think that the new changes address it in the right way, while still holding onto the individual identities of the two different jump packs. So let's check out the positive of the changes, and then the negatives, and then all of the bugs that drifters currently have, both on test server and on live. And then some final thoughts on how to polish things up. Alright, so the good things, right? Like I said, the identities of the two jump jets are still intact, but Drifter is now able to fill a role that it previously had to do in a very roundabout way. So, circumventing enemy defenses. Newer players are going to be able to more easily understand and acclimate themselves to the way that drifters function over the standard jump jets, because there's going to be a little bit more familiarity there. Another big issue of Drifter jump jets is that there's such a disparity between the beginning jump jets and the end, so rank 1 and rank 5. With the new changes, it actually seems to be, you can be very competitive at rank 1 because the jumping mechanics, or the air jump, if you're spamming spacebar, it gives you the same height as a rank 5 Drifter jump jets. So it seems to be percentage based, the initial energy draw. And that's good, because that makes it so rank 1 doesn't feel like they're getting completely screwed over, but at the same time there's still incentive to rank up to rank 5 because of the longer duration, the quicker recharge speed, and that sort of thing. So that's a very, very good balance, and it helps shrink what was a previously abysmal gap in effectiveness between first and max rank drifters. Also, because of that slight forward thrust, even rank 1 drifters become more useful for mobility in general, and this is what really makes the light assault class what it is. And like I said earlier, it does feel very, very good on test server, and I encourage you all to go give it a shot, because it's kind of it's something very interesting. So all of that is good, it makes a lot of sense, and ultimately it works, right? So you can push this change through to live and I'd be more or less okay with it. But before that happens, there's probably some bugs and features that should be ironed out. And firstly, the spam spacebar to gain height mechanic, it feels very sloppy. I mean, it's workable, it just brings with it a lot of downsides that don't necessarily need to be there. The first of which is fuel loss for no good reason. If I'm flying through the air and I let off of jets for a second, either by mistake or if I'm trying to descend a little bit to adjust my positioning, boom, a bunch of fuel is just instantly gone with no benefits because you don't even get back the height that you lost, even if you're really quick on the trigger. The mechanic really only works right now if you have fast hands and you can spam the crap out of the spacebar, and it's even more difficult if you're already mid-flight while trying to gain altitude. The second problem with this mechanic is that it takes far too much coordination to use in a combat scenario. So imagine smashing your spacebar while also moving forward, while strafing, while trying to stay on target, and maybe even burst fire your weapon. There is a mental disconnect there due to the required timing between different keys in different hands, especially for those people who aren't extremely coordinated. So if you're spamming your spacebar with your left hand while trying to aim and click at a different pace with your right, it's like trying to rub your tummy and pat your head. Very, very easy for some people, very difficult for others, but then amplify that by 5 times and you'll probably see what I'm talking. So that creates the limitation of really only trying to ascend when you ignore everything else that's going on. And that's a fine limitation in itself, but it seems unintended and unintuitive instead of being a feature that you're rewarded for overcoming through skill and practice. And the third problem is that it just takes too many key presses to create the desired effect. I need to press the spacebar at least 3 times to even start moving upwards, especially if I'm already mid-flight. So this is a huge and likely unintended draw on your energy pool. Aside from the air jump spam mechanic, the height increase off of the first activation also causes problems with the sliding mechanic, especially when you're trying to use it in the heat of combat. So if you want to slide on the ground, it's counterproductive to have to jump up and away from it. With regular jump jets, you can jump up in the air, you can press and hold crouch, and that's going to help lower you to the ground quickly enough to pull off that sliding maneuver in most situations. And what's more is that players who are experienced with using the floor sliding mechanic will usually crouch, and this helps circumvent the bugs that it has, as in like it helps you stay more attached. Aside from that, crouching, it also helps keep your head down, and you retain that full speed so you become a smaller target, you can sneak behind small hills very quickly. It has a lot of benefits. But ultimately, the vertical boost makes it less intuitive than it already is in situations where you actually need that speed boost. So again, there's a slight conflict right there. But to build on the floor sliding mechanic, it's also causing a lot of problems. Light assaults as a class often utilize treetops, hard to reach areas, cliffs, that sort of thing. But when you're trying to glide up certain sloped surfaces, then you'll be dropped down or like pushed below the surface, so you actually lose height instead of gaining it. And it's not just this tree that's in the footage here, but a lot of sloped surfaces, seemingly depending on the angle. So the only way around this currently is to actually just face like perpendicular the surface of the cliff or the tree or whatever, and then climb up it slowly with drifters instead of meeting it at an angle. And I'm just assuming that this is a problem with the floor sliding mechanic, trying to attach yourself to a surface, but ultimately failing to do so. Another huge problem, just kind of throwing it out there with the sliding mechanic, is that oftentimes you'll be stuck on flat ground. It's like walking through mud. You think you should just be able to glide over it, or like a slightly sloped surface, and you just won't. So that's why people hold crouch. They try to stick themselves to the ground a little bit more. And with the state of things, it makes it's more detrimental than positive, I think. One huge thing that I've been harping on, and it's kind of sort of fixed on live server, is that there is currently no or little to no strafing speed. And I'm fairly convinced that this is a bug, at least to the degree at which it ruins drifters, but I do want to mention it. If you're holding down the A or the D key, so either left or right strafe, you're going to be slowed down an extreme amount, and then you will still descend as quickly as you would if you were to just hold the forward key. So there is no real reason for this slowdown, and hopefully it just gets removed outright before going to live server. However, I would like to mention that a few game updates ago there was something in the patch notes that said something to the effect of drifters will no longer accelerate more quickly than intended while strafing. And I'm paraphrasing because for some reason I can't actually find those patch notes anymore. But the increase in speed while drifting sideways, or more specifically while rounding corners, was a huge boon to drifters, and it helped increase the ability's skill ceiling without touching the skill floor. And I don't know why it was changed. I'm strongly against it. I wish it was turned back. And to my knowledge, it wasn't causing warping, it didn't make it easier to shoot, it really wasn't doing anything harmful. At least that's my perception of things. I obviously don't know a whole lot, but it did add a lot of positives for experienced drifter users. I feel like it was something that was just removed because it was something that you noticed and it wasn't supposed to be like that, so it got fixed. But it did add a lot to the experience, like I mentioned, and I would definitely like to see it come back. But the reason why I bring it up here, aside from being on the soapbox about drifter jump jets, is because you can still strafe quickly, maybe to a lesser degree, but you can do it if you just hold the forward key and then turn to look slowly. So you can still round corners and then you can pick up momentum. You're still technically circle strafing, but it's painful to pull off as you won't be able to look around and shoot, given that the strafe keys no longer conserve your momentum. They crunch it, they smash it, they destroy it. And that's really how I feel drifters should be played, is with intelligent momentum conservation, even when using things like gravity. So if I'm drifting along and then I drop, you know, I'm going to pick up speed as I drop, and then I'm going to hammer on the drifters again, and it's going to slightly increase my horizontal velocity, if only for a short time. That's how I think that drifters should be played. It adds another level of skill there that you can't find with other abilities. Also, an interesting bug that I'm just kind of pointing out is that the new drifters, with max rank and to a lesser degree with lower ranks, I can jump climb certain surfaces almost indefinitely. And the slight forward thrust is pushing me up against the wall again so that I can cling onto it, and you can probably see what's going on a lot easier than I can explain it, so I just wanted to kind of make the developers aware of that. Aside from those issues, to polish the new drifter mechanics, what I would like to personally see is this. Past the first jump and drift from the ground, so if your feet are on the ground, you jump and drift, do not grant vertical motion for subsequent jumps. That and also lower the activation cost past the first jump, and I'm going to get to the reasons why in just a moment. But this encourages smarter movement from the player, which helps newer players learn how to become successful at using drifters in the first place, and still allows experienced players to drop from the sky and reposition while letting on and off of the drifters, without being worried about that extreme increase in activation cost for next to no benefit. If you want to gain that slight forward and vertical thrust again, you have to do it from the ground. So that's the first thing. And remember that the current system does very little to help someone who is already falling, and you can easily waste fuel without any benefit aside from that slight forward thrust. Secondly, just hold the ability key or a double tap on the spacebar and hold to allow that burst of vertical motion in exchange for the increased fuel consumption. So it's essentially the same solution as spamming the spacebar, but in a way that's going to work when you want it to, won't detract from drifters on the whole while not trying to gain height, and will also allow you to fight properly while trying to ascend, since your hands will require less time buttons, and that's going to lead to a better experience overall for both newer and experienced players. And this would likely be more difficult to implement than the current solution from a technical standpoint. I'm just taking a shot in the dark, I don't actually code or anything, but I think that it would really help polish the experience for players. Now here's where people are probably going to hate me, but I would personally like to see the sliding mechanic removed from drifters, or at the very, very least fixed, because as it stands, being dropped from slopes when the game is trying to latch onto the ground, or getting stuck even on flat ground for no reason, is extremely disadvantageous, or at the very least it's extremely annoying. And not only that, poor adrenaline pump certification is being cannibalized by that ability to just slide along the ground at increased speed, and if not cannibalized, then extremely devalued at the very least. So remove the floor sliding. It's entertaining when it works, but in functionality it causes more harm than good. And at least personally, I oftentimes get killed more than I should because I'm trying to use the floor mechanic while crouching and, you know, zooming around, and it's fun. It's fun, I get that. It's fun, and it's so fun that I keep being stupid with it, and I can't imagine that I'm the only one. Instead of floor sliding, just make us start running when we hit the ground. Just let us run around so that the jets aren't taking priority with a broken mechanic. And honestly, it feels like a gimmick that was implemented in order to draw some more players into using drifters. It doesn't change the class for the better or do something that wasn't previously possible, it's just kind of there, and it should be cut from the team. Plus, with the new drifter jump jets, due to that forward thrust mechanic, it feels like you can maintain that same sort of speed that you would get by sliding just by bouncing along the ground. Well, you would be able to if you weren't already getting punished for jumping multiple times. So for those who don't know, when you jump repeatedly, you become increasingly snared. And snared as in your movement speed slows down. And this is going to affect drifter users, especially the low-ranked drifter users who use their pack in bursts just due to that limited duration. One solution to this would be to allow Adrenaline Pump to also remove the snare caused by jumping multiple times. So this encourages that smart movement and planting your feet on the ground without giving you the drawback of having jumped and landed repeatedly. It also helps emphasize the Light Assault's key trait, which is mobility. With the new momentum values on player movement, so if you try to move left, you have to slow down before you move right, I don't really see this affecting things too negatively, for maybe the exception of like a bunny hopping shotgun user, but even then I don't foresee that being a huge issue given that shotguns were rebalanced to avoid inaccuracy, which is what you'd be doing if you're jumping up in the air trying to shoot. This way you're effectively increasing the value of the very lackluster Adrenaline Pump certification without making it a necessity for the class, especially for those lower ranked players who cert into Adrenaline Pump early on because it's inexpensive and it sounds cool. Anyway, I think that was all I had to talk about. I hope the devs do take a look at this, and overall I feel like you're moving in the right direction to fix the issues that the pack has or the issues that the community perceives that the pack has, and I'm sure that regardless of what changes you settle on, you're going to improve upon my absolute favorite ability in the game. Unless you decide to break more things, then I'm going to have to go cry about it in the forums. Thanks very much, folks. Rel signing off.